guys, today we're talking to Thea Mikkelson. She is the author of this amazing book that you can see how amazing it is with all of the post-it notes here, Coaching the Creative Impulse. She is also a business psychologist, and she is also on a panel of psychoanalysts. She's joining us from the lovely place of Milan, Italy. She's going to be sharing all types of different ways to break down creative blocks, how to nurture your creativity, and all of the great things that she has learned on her journey. Please stick around because Thea Mikkelson will be joining us as soon as we come back.
Hi, I'm Amanda Wattenberg, Regional Director at Ohio Guidestone. Do you or does someone you know have a substance abuse disorder? Have you been thinking about getting help but don't know where to start? It takes a lot of courage to ask for help, but it's the most important step you can take. If you think you know everything that's available in Fairfield County, think again. Like other chronic diseases, addiction can be managed successfully. Treatment enables people to counteract addiction's powerful, disruptive effects on the brain's behavior and regain control of their lives. Even if it takes multiple attempts, treatment does work and people do recover from addiction every day. So keep trying because your life matters. You matter, and we're here to help. Call 211 and ask for the treatment resources available right here in Fairfield County.
This message is brought to you by the Fairfield County Adam H. Board.
Hey guys, we're back. This is Healthy Life Designing. Our amazing guest joining us all the way from the gorgeous place of Italy. Thea Mikkelson is here joining us. Thank you so much for being on here today.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me to come.
I can't get over we're so far away, but yet, I mean, one thing is what drew me to you was your book.
But isn't it a little exciting during this year how we reach each other more easily? Even though it has been a very difficult year, I find that we are communicating as an international community in a closer way.
Yes, absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got started? Because I mean, we're talking a lot about creativity today, but this is international, and you've done so many different things in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, I guess my journey started with working with professional creative people. Already started when I was a small child, since my mother was a filmmaker. So I was always curious about what is it that makes it possible to create something artistically, but also creative in any sense of the word. And then I studied comparative literature and cultural studies. And as a part of that study, I went to the former Yugoslavia, to Sarajevo, where I worked with people who was preparing exhibitions to help understand the traumas after the war. Mm. And this got me very, very curious into what it takes to be creative and what it means, and also the value in it for us as human beings. So I decided that I would take a full extra education as a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So I did that in order to work with professional creative people and to help creative people to better understand the inner landscapes of their creativity. So maybe not to be better artists and creative people as such, but to have more enjoyable lives and to be more relaxed in the processes. Because what I noticed was that there is this fantasy that you can be creative in a very effective way. And that is also true when it comes to these moments when you have your ideas. But in order to get these ideas, you need a lot of time where it feels like you're not producing anything, but where your unconscious is at work. Mm-hmm. And during these phases, you can be very self-punishing, and you can be maybe have feelings of meaninglessness, or you can be anxious whether the ideas will ever come again to you. And I wanted to find out how is it that we can help each other? How is it as a business psychologist, can help people to trust the process more and to find out their individual way of dealing with the different phases in a creative process.
Yes.
So when I finished, I started working at the creative schools in Denmark, the Academy for Architecture and Design, and the Danish Film School, and in Norway as well, in the creative schools there. So I did that for some years, and then I started working with creative companies in Denmark and Norway and museums, and now I work with a lot of different creative people, both people who have reached their highest goals and has had some of the finest international awards in the world, and some who are just struggling to take the first steps. And I can say that for every one of them, it is true that they have to face some very personal and existential questions in order to find out how they relate to their work and to taking up this very, very, very deep and very existential challenge it is to decide that you want to have creativity at the core of your life.
Yes. And speaking of personal, what comes to my mind is, in your book, you had mentioned different types of relationships, and that it really struck me, just learning that there can be a relationship that is geared as a creative relationship. And then I think another word that you used is direct relationships. Can you talk about that?
Yes, and that has to do with the purpose of the relationship. Because for many people, being in a relationship is about having an intimate relation to another person where you are met as the one you are. But sometimes in our lives, we meet people where it's not about us as such, but it's more about our creative dreams, things we want to explore, and we want to find a voice to express this thing we are after. And sometimes when this happens, we can have very, very intense relationship with other people who understand this. And in our mind and in our soul, this can be translated into real love, as the love we have for our loved ones. And sometimes that is that can be very painful, because all the other things that has to be there in order to establish a relationship might not be there, because those who are engaged in this relationship are really there in order to create something, a product or whatever they are after.
Right.
And I have seen also friendships being challenged in deep creative projects, where the friendship has to or you have to decide, what is this friendship for? Because what do you do when you suddenly have to go through feelings that you're not comfortable with, or you have to, especially there's something about the feeling of aggression when you have to insist on a specific detail of the project, because you know that's how you want the project to be, and you are not open to other suggestions, and you are not willing to go into compromises.
Yes.
And that's why it becomes really difficult if you work creatively with somebody who's also a friend or a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever.
Right. Well, and then you can have the other side of really creative people that are in relationships with people that are not so creative the way you are. And so I'm very visionary and my husband is very different. And so I will get frustrated trying to explain the vision, excuse me, that I already have for something. And I know it's going to work. It's in my head and I see every detail. But then when I explain it to him, he's in frustration because he learns differently. He wants to see it written out, drawn out, the entire plan, and I respect that. But at the same time, I get so frustrated that I'm like, I've said it so many times. How do you not understand?
Yes. Yeah, and that's just one of the issues that could be there, because another thing that can also sometimes be a problem is all the time you use before you can really express your idea, where you are daydreaming and you are withdrawing into your inner world, where you are working to find out how do I conceptualize this idea. And during that period, it can be felt that you're not really present in the family life or in your life as such, because you're really in your inner world, warming this idea up. And that can also be frustrating if you don't understand that you married. I'm sure your husband does, but in relationships where one has not really understood that he or her or whatever married a creative person, this can be very challenging.
Right. Something else that I have written in my notes is something that you had wrote in your book is, what would you lose if you were to respond to a creative impulse?
Yeah. What are the thoughts you get when you read that?
I feel like it's one of those things where it's taking a risk, and if what's going to happen, what could go wrong, and what's going to happen if I fail, if I go after this idea. That's what comes to my mind.
Yes, and this is very important, I think. And then what I found out is also that the way you deal with these questions are really very personal, and you will always face a very personal dilemma when you are confronting these kind of questions, because that takes you into how do you feel about risk. And for some people, risk is really exciting. That's something we want to have in our lives. And for others, it's really, really dangerous, because you lose everything you love. So when you face these kinds of questions, it is a very, very personal and existential question for you. And it will be important for where you can take your work and your career, whether you do one or the other. That doesn't mean that it's always better to take a risk. Sometimes it's not better to take a risk.
Right.
But what you have to find out as a creative person is that you have to have like two goals. There's one goal that has to do with achieving what you want, and there's another goal that has to do with how do I keep my creativity going? How much risk do I have to take? How exciting does it have to be in order for my creativity to flourish? Can you relate to that?
Yes. Well, because I feel like it's one of those things that I know when I get started on a creative project and I am just distractions are everywhere, or someone's knocking on the door, the phone's ringing, there's kids running up and down the stairs, or somebody's pulling in the driveway, and I'm fixated on creating this amazing logo, but I can't because I feel like it's start, stop. And I feel best if I have a solid 5 hours of no interruptions and it's quiet and I have a certain type of music on. Then the ideas start to flow and then they grow.
Yes, but and this is especially this year, this is a very, very interesting place to be, isn't it? Because most of us have lived this life at home with our children. Those of us who have children, of course, but for many of us, during this year, we have had to find a way to create a space for our creativity within all the other obstacles. And how we do that is really, really personal. For some, it means that we have to insist of these 5 hours. And for some, it means that will never be possible. For instance, I have a client right now who's a single mom. I mean, she cannot have 5 hours alone, but she can find small spaces of freedom. And then it also comes to, how do you understand yourself as a mother? How do you understand your purpose in life? What will it give to your kids that you manage to have maybe 1 hour where they are then allowed to maybe watch TV or whatever, so that you have a little space for yourself? And how do you find that? How do you create the positive experiences around your creativity? Because what I have heard this year over and over again is parents, for instance, who have been running around trying to find a little quiet place where they could be doing what they loved very much with their creative work. And sometimes doing this can take up so much energy, instead of just deciding to have the balance and the joy in our family. Mom or dad or who it is has to have a little space alone sometimes.
Right. I love that. And I think that's a great time for us to take a break right here. You guys, you've been listening to Thea Mikkelson. She is joining us all the way from Italy, and we're going to have more talk about creativity when we come back.
Fairfield Federal. When it comes to our customers and our community, we go above and beyond to help. Our people make the difference.
We were retiring from Tucson, Arizona, and we made a retirement trip out around Ohio, having decided that's where we wanted to be. And we came across this town called Lancaster, and we fell in love with the downtown area, where the fountain is, and the memorials, and the flags, and all this stuff. And we looked around, and I said, there's our bank, right there.
There's something to be said about a community bank in your hometown.
Right. If you live in the community, you should do business in the community as much as possible. So it makes sense to bank with the community bank where you live.
Fairfield Federal is the bank to be at. If you live in this town, or any town actually, you want to bank at a local home bank. And the employees are happy here. They're conversant. Customer service is through the roof. There's nothing more you could ask for.
Personal or business banking, whatever you need, we take it seriously because we know you do. Stop by today at any of our 3 locations and see why the difference is clear. Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan specializes in banking that revolves around you.
Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
Okay, guys, we're back. This is Healthy Life Designing. We have been talking to business psychologist that has spent so many years researching creativity. Thea Mikkelson has been talking with me, and we've been kind of sifting through some of the things in your book. And now we were just talking about self-awareness and how important that is for the creative person.
Yes. As I see it, it is actually the core of what you have to be aware of as a creative person wanting to deal with the process differently. So if you want to change something, if you have the feeling that you get stuck the same places in the process every time you try to create something, then it's not really about finding the right tricks to get by. But it is about understanding who you are a little better. So you know what it is, what are the more unconscious conflicts that hold you back? Could it be that you might not want, or you could be maybe afraid of jealousy from somebody else if you manage to succeed with what you're after, or that you would outshine something that is, or someone who is very important to you? Or what is it that you are dealing with when it is difficult for you to to keep on working with your projects. And knowing some of the things that we know about creative processes and about the inner life of creative people will help you to accept who you are. Because one of the most important things in the research of the creative personality is that creative personalities are never stereotypes. Everyone that you can study.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again? It froze for a second.
Yes, I can. Know that everybody, if you look through the history and you go to all the most important creative people in history who have really done something remarkable, you will see that none of them are stereotypes. They are all very particular human beings. And to acknowledge this as a part of yourself as well, that where your creativity lies is also somewhere in yourself that you can relate to in a very, very personal way. And that also means that it is not something most of us are trained to take care of, because throughout our educational systems, we learn how to take, the right jackets on to fit in the cultural norms around us, and to break out from that and say, well, I arrange my possibilities a little differently, and I enjoy something that might be a little different from what you enjoy, can be very, very challenging, because all of us, we also want to be part of a group and to be accepted. And this is also why it's so important in creative group work that we have a feeling of psychological safety. Yes. Because that makes it possible for us to show a little more about what it is we like and what we can relate to and what we can understand. And when this comes out from everybody in the group, then we have much more to work with. And that's a much bigger opportunity for us to find out how could we connect the dots differently and create something that is new and has a meaning to all of us.
Yes. And so does that where the design thinking method comes into play?
One of the things that I'm looking into right now is how we can use the design thinking method to create safe spaces. Because the design thinking, for those who might not be familiar with the concept, design thinking has to do with creating something from a design point of view, meaning designing something, creating something new, but to do it through particular phases, so that you start with exploring what could be the need of the receiver. And then you look at how could we get ideas from looking into how similar products are used. And then we try to find a concept that is also where the particularly artistic part of the process is, where we come with our idea of how to solve a specific problem, and then we try it out at the end. And the thing is that in all these phases, we have to be courageous. We have to tell what our thoughts and feelings are in order for the process to really have the possibility of not just stating the obvious. So working with a design thinking methodology can help you to explain to participants what is expected of you right now. And right now, it is allowed for you to express your personal feelings and ideas about a specific subject. So in that way, it can help to hold or create some boundaries around the creative work that can help us to go into it without being afraid of maybe competition
Judgment. Yes.
or
Yes. It nurtures it. It's almost like it's to nurture it so it can grow. And when you adapt to yourself and whatever that looks like, the more you can nurture what that is, the more creativity can evolve. And another thing that I really found interesting, because I know I do this, you can't see in my office. I might snap a picture of this and share it, but I have a whole wall that I dedicated to my ideas, because I've been told my ideas are too big or too crazy in multiple situations and in different businesses, different ideas. And then I had a friend at one point said, put it in your someday file. And I thought, I want to see my ideas, because to me, I feel like they come to life quicker if I have it wrote down in something colorful. And so on my wall, on my board, I have different colors and different Post-it notes of book ideas or what I want to change in my website. And what I found is, for myself, it happens more quickly. I mean, even more so than me writing it in a journal. And I'm sure you could explain maybe why that would happen.
Yeah, I noticed before when you showed the book, you said this must be on a green Post-it note. So I guess you have some kind of system with your Post-it notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the book with lots of fun notes in here.
Yeah. But and that is a very, very good idea, because also if you live a creative life, with many different projects evolving, then it can be difficult to get hold of all the ideas you get. So to find a way to really capture them and to give them an identity is very, very good. And just to give them a color with your Post-it notes is a way to give them an identity. If, for instance, you have a system that says, this is for TV shows, and this is for something that might be interesting in the future, but I don't know yet, and this might be for a book, and this might be, then you already help these ideas to get a little bit of an identity. And then it's easier to begin to work with them. Because another thing about creativity that's very important to remember is that creativity is not a good idea. Creativity is having the good idea and finding a way to make it reality. Whether it is as a drawing or as a book or a TV show or whatever, it is not to get the idea that is the creative process. It is to find out how do you do it. And then what happens is that when you start doing it, that's also one of the interesting things about the design thinking method is all these prototypes you have to do. Because when you start to make your idea reality, then it speaks back to you, if you can say it like that. But you start to have a dialogue with the idea you had and the concrete outcome. And then you can see, maybe my idea wasn't exactly the right one. Maybe I have to change it just a little bit more. And this is, where our imagination and reality meet each other. And this is where creativity happens.
Yes. One more question that I have is creative blocks. Can you talk about that?
Yes, as a creative blocks is very, very complex to understand, because not all creative blocks are really creative blocks. Some of them is your unconscious working a little slower than you would like it to. So sometimes when you feel blocked, and many people describe it as being in a dream or a feeling of being a little out of reality. And they are working to find out what should be the plot in this next episode of this TV series, or what should be, the facade of this new building I'm into. And they can't find the right expression. Then sometimes it is because some norms, something they have learned, something that might, to some extent, be their professional ability and something you would really like to have, can sometimes prevent you from seeing how you can take something further. And I'm sure everyone who has worked with projects on a professional level has experienced this, that you somehow get stuck in how we used to do it, and finding out what is the next step for how can we take this idea further can be sometimes it feels like it is impossible to go there, like our minds doesn't see it, and then when the idea comes, it's like obvious. Yes. This is also what Sigmund Freud calls that you recognize something you've never seen before. So it's like you see it again, but you never saw it before. But that means that it corresponds to something you were after. You were really on a journey finding something. And sometimes when we have the feeling that we have a creative block, this is what is happening. It is something in our unconscious that is moving very, very slowly to let go of preconceptions we had before.
That is so interesting. And it's so crazy that what you can learn just taking the time, because you mentioned the word personal many times. And I feel like creativity is something, I know I've heard myself say it to my own clients multiple times. And it's actually how I stumbled upon you, was that I was actually looking for creative coaching because I thought there has to be somebody out there that can help, coach you through these creative blocks. And I've had clients that have said, well, I'm not creative at all. And I'm like, yes, you are. You're just not creative in the way that I'm creative. I just love how it brings a person together as a whole.
And I think that, what you eat and how you exercise and everything can help you creatively as well, because it can also be an important step to take yourself seriously. And you can also you will learn your emotions and your feelings better by relating to different programs of exercise and different programs of what you eat. But another thing I wanted to say was that last year I created this core coaching process that has to do with something of what you're saying, because what I realized was that people who think they're not creative, or people who feels they are very creative but just get stuck somewhere in their professional development, are often confronted with some kind of question that they don't dare to go into because it will be too challenging for their identity, or for their relation to the workplace, or their relation to important people in their lives. So to look at these dilemmas and to reflect on what is it that keeps me back here? What is it that holds me back here? And how can I look at this in a way so that I will not push away important relations or important working opportunities, but I will still have the chance to use my creativity in a way that will make me happier, and maybe also a way that can create more value.
Absolutely. And you've done just that. You've created a ton of value for me personally, and hopefully for everyone watching. I want to mention your book, Thea Mikkelson. She has wrote this amazing book, Coaching the Creative Impulse. You guys, seriously, this is no joke. I even took some out so I would be less of a distraction. But could you share with everybody where they could find out more information about you?
They can see my website, theamikkelson.com, or on LinkedIn or Facebook, and on Instagram, I have one as well called Thea Mikkelson Prof Creativity.
All right. Well, thank you so, so much. This has been such a treat getting to talk to you today.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me.
All right, guys, that's all that we have time for today. Thanks for watching. See you soon.